Would you rather have a bigger tablet with a higher resolution, faster refresh rate, and a free stylus, or a more powerful tablet that's more capable for gaming, has an aspect ratio that's better suited for note-taking, and with a more dedicated app ecosystem? These are some of the choices you'll have to make when choosing between the iPad 10 and the Tab S9 FE. Both tablets are about the same price in the US, but I know the prices around the world are really different. So if you're watching this from outside of the US, please let me know in the comment section where you're from and how much the base models of each of these tablets cost where you live. So the first thing that most people look at is the display. And in that case, the iPad 10 has a 10.9-inch Liquid Retina 60Hz display with a resolution of 1640 by 2360, a 4:3 aspect ratio, and 264 pixels per inch. The Tab S9 FE Plus has an IPS LCD display, which offers a faster 90Hz adaptive refresh rate, a higher resolution of 1600 by 2560, but a lower pixel density of 243 pixels per inch. In terms of image quality, both displays are sharp and crisp, and if I'm being critical, the iPad has better color accuracy, and the Tab S9 FE Plus is a bit warmer and has a slight greenish tint. I do prefer the 90Hz on the Tab S9 FE Plus because things like UI animations and scrolling look smoother. Now, 60Hz has never been a deal breaker for me, and right now I'm using 3 different phones: the iPhone 15 Pro Max, the Samsung S24 Ultra, and the Pixel 8 Pro, all of which have 120 Hz displays, but I think that a higher refresh rate is a nice to have, but not critical for most tasks on a mobile device. Now, there are exceptions, of course, like some games, and we'll get to that in the dedicated gaming section of this video. In terms of aspect ratios, with the iPad 10, we're getting a 4:3 aspect ratio, which is really nice when taking handwritten notes using the Apple Pencil. But overall, the Tab S9 FE is still wider in portrait mode because the tablet is larger. The FE Plus is better suited for watching video because the 16:10 aspect ratio is closer to most content and the image is larger and has smaller black bars. Now, another important difference is that the Tab S9 FE Plus has a fully laminated display, so the display, the touch layer, and the cover glass are fused together into a single display assembly, and the image looks like it's printed right on top of the glass. On the iPad 10, there is an air gap between the display and the combination of cover glass and touch layer. For a lot of things like watching movies, surfing the web, or playing games, it's not really something that you're going to notice unless you really look for it. But when you're using the stylus, it does make a difference. With the iPad 10, you'll be able to see separation between the tip of the Apple Pencil and the content that's being created, especially if you're looking at an angle. With the Tab S9 FE Plus, because the image looks like it's right on top of the glass, it's going to look like the tip of the S Pen is actually touching the line or the content that you're creating, which of course is better. Now, the one advantage of a non-laminated display is that if the display gets damaged or scratched, most of the time it's just the cover glass, so the replacement is relatively inexpensive. With a fully laminated display, the entire display assembly has to be replaced, even if it's just a scratch on the cover glass. I'll also get to a few other important stylus differences in just a moment, but first let's talk about gaming. So I play a ton on my tablets, and I was really curious. I really wanted to see how these tablets would match up. Now, overall, I was able to play my usual games on both tablets, and that includes Genshin, Asphalt, PUBG, and then of course some less demanding games. But there was an obvious difference in both processing power and GPU performance, which did have an impact on my experience when I played more resource-intensive games. Now, I'll quickly show you the benchmarks in the performance section, but gaming was one of those areas where I could very clearly notice the advantage of the older but more capable A14 Bionic chip on the iPad 10 when compared with the Exynos 1380 on the Tab S9 FE Plus. Now, using PUBG as an example, gameplay was smoother and more responsive on the iPad. I could play with balanced graphics and extreme frame rate versus balanced graphics and high frame rate on the Tab S9 FE Plus. So even though the FE Plus display can technically reach a faster 90 FPS, it didn't result in a practical advantage for PUBG. Now, I had a similar experience with Genshin, where again, it just performed better on the iPad 10, even though it has less RAM than the Tab S9 FE Plus. Now, I always like to mention that we know game developers will look to push the CPU and GPU, and games are going to evolve and start to demand more and more resources. So if I'm looking to keep a device for at least 4 to 5 years or even longer, I'm always going to opt for a tablet that has better CPU and GPU performance so that it continues to perform well into the future. Now, if you want to stream and play Xbox games with the Xbox Game Pass app, you can pair an Xbox controller with both tablets and have extremely smooth gameplay as long as you have a reliable internet connection, and I'll give the edge to the FE Plus because of the larger display. Now, another area where the Tab S9 FE Plus comes out ahead is storage. So the iPad 10 starts out with 64 gigabytes of internal storage versus 128 gigabytes on the Tab S9 FE Plus. Now, to give you a sense of what that means, iPad OS currently takes up a little over 10 gigabytes of storage, system data takes up another 11 gigs, and PUBG uses up a little over 20 gigs with the maps and resources that I have downloaded. So that's 41 of the 64 available gigs already used up with no other apps, files, or photos. And both tablets are also available with a 256 gigabyte option. With the iPad, that's an additional $150, and with the Tab S9 FE Plus, it's an extra $100, which also gives you a bump in RAM, but we'll cover that in the configuration section. Now, the FE Plus also has a micro SD card slot, which allows you to expand the internal storage by up to 1 terabyte, and you can use this storage for files, for photos, for videos, and for most apps. Now, when we look at the overall design of these tablets, both tablets are machined aluminum, both have rounded corners and squared off edges, but the Tab S9 FE Plus is larger and has slightly smaller bezels. We're getting a fingerprint sensor incorporated into the power button with both devices. On the iPad 10, it's on the short side. On the Tab S9 FE Plus, it's on the longer side, and both have been very accurate and responsive for me. Now, the iPad 10 has 4 speaker grills versus 2 on the Tab S9 FE Plus, but both tablets only have 2 speakers, 1 on each side. In terms of audio quality, both are good. They're not as good as the higher end models, and between these two, the Tab S9 FE Plus speakers are a little bit louder and they sound brighter. Another nice feature about the FE Plus is that it has an IP68 rating, so we're getting protection from water and dust. Now, obviously, this is important if you take your tablet with you when you travel or if you use it outside a lot, but even around the house, it's super nice to have additional protection from accidental spills, especially, if you have kind of an active dog. Now, both tablets use a USB-C port for charging and connecting accessories, which brings me to the stylus and keyboard option. So the FE Plus comes with a free S Pen, which can be stored on the side or the back of the tablet. It has a programmable button, and it doesn't need to be charged in order to write or draw. The iPad 10 is compatible with the first generation Apple Pencil, which costs $99. It pairs and charges using a cable and requires a Lightning to USB-C adapter. The iPad is also compatible with the newer USB-C Apple Pencil, which charges and pairs with a wire and doesn't require an adapter. It costs $79, doesn't offer pressure sensitivity, but it does magnetically attach to the side of the iPad. In terms of the actual writing experience, the Apple Pencil has a firm tip, so it's a little harsher when it hits the glass, and it feels like you're writing or drawing on a single sheet of paper that's placed on a hard surface. The S Pen has a softer tip, so when it hits the glass, it gives a little, and it feels more like you're writing on a full pad of paper where the pages compress as you press down. Now, one isn't objectively better than the other for every use, and it's going to come down to what feels better for you, so hopefully this description was helpful. When we look at keyboard cases with trackpads, the Tab S9 FE Plus uses the book cover keyboard, and the iPad 10 uses a Magic Keyboard Folio. Both have a similar design with detachable keyboard and an adjustable back. The Samsung book cover keyboard is larger, it can be angled farther back, so it's more adjustable. It also has a bump out for the S Pen, so it's always protected. At the same time, the Magic Keyboard Folio is more solidly built. It has better keys and a more responsive and more accurate trackpad. Now, one final advantage of the Magic Keyboard Folio is that the keyboard can be flipped and reattached so that when it folds back, the keys are not exposed. As far as camera systems, the iPad has a more capable rear-facing camera in terms of resolution and frame rate, but the Tab S9 FE Plus has a wide and an ultra-wide camera. Practically speaking, I don't really use the rear-facing cameras on my tablet, so for me, that's not a huge deciding factor. Both tablets have a 12-megapixel front-facing camera, and here's a quick sample. Here's a camera and microphone comparison of the iPad 10 and the Tab S9 FE Plus. This should give you a pretty good idea of the type of image quality that you're going to get and the type of audio quality that you should expect from each tablet. I also like the fact that in both cases, the camera is placed in the center of the long edge, and this way you're always properly framed for video calls. Now, when we talked about gaming, I mentioned the performance of the iPad's A14 Bionic and the FE Plus's Exynos 1380. So let's quickly look at single and multi-core performance, where we see the Apple chip pull ahead. We also see it score noticeably higher in GPU performance, which helps explain some of the differences we saw. Now, of course, these are just benchmark scores, so what about typical everyday use? Well, if you're surfing the web, watching video, or going on social media, it doesn't really mean much, and you can easily do that with both tablets, but the iPad definitely feels snappier and more responsive, and it should continue to perform better for longer. If you're doing something like heavy photo or video editing, then again, the iPad would be a better option. When multitasking, the iPad can run 2 apps in split view, plus additional apps in a slide over window. The Tab S9 FE Plus can run 3 tiled apps with more flexibility when it comes to how much real estate each app takes. It can also run multiple floating windows, which can be resized and can even change the transparency. And on top of that, it has a larger display. Now, both tablets have a customizable dock, but the Tab S9 FE Plus also has a super handy side panel for quick access. Both tablets can be used as additional displays for compatible desktops and laptops. Apple calls this feature Sidecar and Samsung calls it Second Screen. And these are great features for both tablets, so you should definitely use them. But if you're looking for more of a laptop replacement, the Tab S9 FE Plus has DeX, which I love, but there is one limitation. If you're new to Samsung tablets, DeX essentially reboots the tablet with an OS that looks very similar to what you get on a laptop. You've got a taskbar where you can minimize and see active apps, you have an actual desktop with icons, and you can run multiple floating windows or snap windows to the sides of the display. But unlike with the Tab S9, S9 Plus, and S9 Ultra, you can't connect an external display and then run a dual display setup with the FE Plus. And if you want to learn more about that, watch this full comparison. Now, the iPad 10 does let you mirror your display to an external display, but it doesn't stretch out to use the entire monitor because the iPad 10 doesn't fully support Stage Manager and it's not an extended display. So when it comes to being a laptop replacement, it's still a win for the Tab S9 FE Plus, but not quite as good as what you get with the higher end models. Now, battery life is always interesting because it does come down to what you actually do. Now, comparing these devices when they were new, I'm looking at about 10 hours with the iPad 10 and about 13 to 14 hours from the Tab S9 FE Plus, again, depending on what I was doing. Now, of course, these times aren't with me gaming the entire time, and they include surfing the web, watching video, and working with productivity and social media apps. When you're looking for available apps, the Google Play Store, the Galaxy Store, and the Apple App Store have tons of options for pretty much everything that you need. In general, I'm still going to give the edge to the iPad 10 because the apps seem to be better optimized for a tablet, but as I've said in other recent videos, the gap continues to close. Now, several creative apps like Affinity Photo and Procreate are only available for the iPad, but it's great to see that there is an Android version of LumaFusion. Now, both tablets run the latest available operating systems, and Samsung promises 4 years of OS updates and 5 years of security updates. Apple devices typically get longer support than that, and when I take into account the improved CPU and GPU performance, I'm going to give the iPad the edge in terms of longevity. It's also super important that you consider the other products that you own which make up your ecosystem. Samsung has made some wonderful improvements over the past few years, adding much needed integration between multiple devices, things like wireless file and text sharing, and additional cross-device integrations. And even though the gap continues to shrink, Apple's ecosystem is still more complete and more tightly integrated due to the fact that they have full control of the hardware and the software on all their devices. Now, when we look at the configuration options and prices from the official stores, we already talked about the storage options, but both the 64 and the 256 gigabytes models of the iPad 10 come with 4 gigabytes of RAM. With the FE Plus, the 128 gigabyte model comes with 8 gigs of RAM, and the 256 gigabyte model comes with 12. There are also some great discounts going on right now, and I make sure to update the links in the description when I find better ones. So here's how I look at this decision. The iPad 10 is smaller and lighter, it's more powerful, and it will be more capable if you plan on keeping your device for many years and you like to play more demanding games at higher settings, or plan on performing other resource-intensive tasks. It also offers better optimized apps, exclusive access to some creative-specific apps, and better long-term support. The Tab S9 FE Plus is larger. It offers additional protection with an IP68 rating. It comes with a free S Pen, more storage on the base model, expandable storage, more capable multitasking, and better battery life. You know what I always say? Buy it nice or buy it twice. Good luck and see you soon.